Good evening, everyone.
All right. All right. Shh. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's House of Speakeasy's Seriously Entertaining. I'm Amanda Foreman. This is my co-founder, Lucas Whitman. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a literary nonprofit dedicated to bringing communities together through the power of ideas and writing. Over to you, Lucas.
And we just want to take a moment. This is our 10th anniversary. So we started 10 years ago. And in that time, we've had over 80 shows here at Joe's Pub on the stage. We've had our bookmobile has gone to 18 different cities across America, has given away over 20,000 books. Our Speak Together school program has worked with over 2,500 students in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx, including this very morning at the Fordham High School for the Arts, where we worked with over 100 students. We brought writers in to speak to them. So just want to take a moment to thank you all for your support, and thank you for coming out tonight before we go on to the seriously entertaining portion of the evening. So big round of applause to everyone. Thank you. And appropriately enough for celebrating our 10th anniversary, our theme tonight is the road ahead. So let's hear to the next 10 years. And our first speaker on that theme is Marie Brenner. Marie is a writer at large for Vanity Fair. She's a former writer for The New Yorker and New York Magazine. She's won numerous awards for her reporting across the world. I'm sure all of you have read some of her pieces. And her new book, which is this incredibly gripping and moving story called The Desperate Hours, One Hospital's Fight to Save a City on the Pandemic's Front Lines. And it's a story of a hospital in New York City during the pandemic. Author James Stewart has said of The Desperate Hours, all the drama of ER with fast-paced narrative writing and deep first-hand reporting. This is a richly populated story that is as moving as it is authoritative. Please welcome Marie Brenner to the stage.
Oh my gosh. Well, what a fabulous group this is. Thank you, Amanda and Lucas. It is a thrill and a total delight for me to be in such a stellar lineup for such a wonderful cause. Okay, so here we go. God, I hope the Klonopin is kicked in. Okay. Salute to the tapeworm. Okay, I know, a tapeworm, get over it. Okay, but writers need to somehow get hooked by the inner lives of those they write about, to find a compelling reason to stay through something, the long, horrible slog of actually getting a book to happen. So my question for you all is, how do you, and all the writers in the room, fall in love with your future subject? Let me set the scene. March 2020. Exactly 3 years ago, this very week, in our greatest city and in our greatest hospital, New York Presbyterian, no one is prepared for what was coming at us like a rocket. Yeah, right? Like a certain little overwhelming medical mystery and a catastrophe that descended on the planet. So, you know, as a reporter, certain stories just have to be told. And when I heard about this opportunity to go backstage at New York Presbyterian in the sort of the final moments of the first surge and stay through it through the next 6 or 8 months, I could not wait to get inside with these medical gladiators to try to figure out how they rode the dragon. So you've heard of the expression getting inside a story. Well, this coming story gives this an entirely new meaning. In this case, the device I used was at first glance absolutely gross. Let's go to the slide. The lowly tapeworm became my North Star, that wretched parasite that we dread almost more than any other infestation. So, back to the future. I know what you're thinking. How can I get the hell out of the door? But just consider the humble tapeworm in all its beauty. In Latin, Tina Solium. The Tina Solium, in certain circles, is the Louis B. Mayer of parasites, the star maker who was responsible for realigning the molecules of our greatest medical detectives. So this is the story of how the tapeworm, the Tina Solium, became the creator of illustrious careers. So, back to the future. The year is 1970. The place, Cornell Medical School, the beating heart of the medical elite establishment of New York City's Upper East Side. The mayor is the urbane dreamboat, John Lindsay, who often appeared in his Bermuda shorts at the recently opened Baskin-Robbins, a first in the city and in the nation. That summer, my first in New York, Vietnam protests took over Central Park. Thousands of women burned their bras on Fifth Avenue. The air was perfumed with pot. It was glorious. But at Cornell Medical School at 68th and York, the almost all-male class in their Bass-Weegians and navy blazers, these boys were cramming for their medical boards, and they idolized a showboat of a doctor, a brilliant guru of parasites with a mahogany tan. Meet Ben Keane, then and now the most improbable North Star of the pandemic of 2020. How to describe him? Doctors can no longer write the name-dropping memoirs that Ben Keane used to routinely churn out, nor, since the advent of HIPAA, talk about, as Keane frequently did, his patient Salvador Dali's chronic stomach agonies. But Keane was a man of charisma with a celebrated wife, the dancer and arts patron Rebecca Harkness. He was a showman. But most of all, he was a pathologist extraordinaire who punched his ticket during the war in the Canal Zone, finding the rarest of creatures in his laboratory. After the war, he was rewarded by the Army, who dispatched him to Berlin to chase down all the counterfeit penicillin that was killing all of the soldiers who took it. But enthralled by these mysterious creatures who lived in the gut, he soon made his way to New York City to rocket to glory on the Upper East Side when he discovered the bug that was the cause of turista. By the 1960s, he was reigning over the digestive tracts of the rich and the famous who made their way to his Park Avenue office. He had his own mythic laboratory at New York Hospital where he presided over, oh my God, all of the digestion of everyone from Oscar Hammerstein to Gertrude Lawrence. And a famous story, he once saved Gertrude Lawrence's larynx by taking a train to New Haven for the opening night of The King and I when she was felled by laryngitis. He became the ruling pasha of New York Hospital, now known as Weill Cornell, which is, of course, the Emerald City of medical care of New York Presbyterian. Who hasn't been treated there? Jackie Onassis, the Shah of Iran, presidents and prime ministers, all could be found in its VIP suites overlooking the East River. I would venture to guess that 3/4 of this room has been treated at New York Hospital. But not only was Keane a genius medical detective, he was as well a charismatic bon vivant who would regale his patients and all of his medical students with the latest parasite news he had extracted from Cuban sugar barons. On the podium at the medical school, he would take to the podium wearing this incredible navy blue velvet blazer. He always brought his Westie on a leash, and he was incredibly always smoking a cigar in the middle of the medical school as he lectured. So one day, this extraordinary rumor begins circulating through the medical school. Dr. Keane had extracted a record-breaking tapeworm from the digestive tract of a South American uranium king. 30 feet, What? Everyone in the medical was saying, that's impossible. Another one of Dr. Keane's preposterous mythic tales. How long could this tapeworm be? No one before 1970 had ever extracted a tapeworm of this dimension. Not only had this been expelled from a uranium king, but it was right now draped on the sofa in the patient's baronial suite, being admired by a group of the uranium king's millionaire cronies, or so went the story around the hospital. But another story went around. Even more thrilling, Keane was said to be bringing the famous tapeworm to that week's tropical disease lecture for the entire medical school to admire. So, on the day of the lecture, a crowd forms in the halls. The medical schools is just packed, and the residents are pushing their way in to fight over the seats. They are literally diving for the seats in the auditorium. And who was in the hall that day fighting for a seat? Who else but the tough-minded, young chief resident, Tony Fauci. The residents, true story, the residents and interns were already so intimidated by the already apparent genius of the diminutive Fauci that when he would come in, people would kind of like, they would scurry around. He took no prisoners, then and now, and when it was about the rigor of medical care. If a case was complicated, young Dr. Fauci would appear at the door with the kind of cowering interns and medical students, and he would say to them, "Okay, everyone, out, I'm taking over." That day, Ben Keane did not disappoint. There, along with his Westie and the cigar and the navy blazer, was the 30-foot worm in its proper lab beaker. Not long after, young Tony Fauci went down the chute to his medical future to start his astonishing career at the National Institute of Health. And so many others of Ben Keane's all-stars became our nation's most eminent virus detectives, including the current emeritus head of tropical medicine at Weill Cornell, who first told me the story when I started my reporting. Keane stayed in touch with all of them, and he helped them figure out AIDS and a puzzle piece that he brought to that incredible tragedy that extended back to his work in the villages of Haiti. And as spring 2020 rolled into New York, Keane was sadly gone, but his successors found themselves once again confronting a great unknown, as confounded and exhilarated and in awe of all that lay ahead of them as everything that had come before.
Thank you, Marie. That was terrific. Our next speaker, you didn't think you were going to hear about tapeworms tonight, did you? How's the food? Our second speaker here tonight, Alex Segura. Alex is a best-selling and award-winning author of Secret Identity, which the New York Times called wittily original. And he's the author of the Anthony Award-nominated Pete Fernandez Miami Mystery Series. And Miami is actually where Alex last took the SpeakEasy stage. In 2018, we did a show at the Miami Book Fair, and he was there with us. So we're delighted to have him up north tonight. It's a little colder and not quite as, we had the moon overhead last time, but, we'll make do. In his own words, Alex has written, "Most of my own stories are connected to a few things: my Cuban-American heritage, Miami, and overcoming adversity to reach your goals." Please welcome Alex to the stage.
Okay, I guess I'll just scream into the mic like Eddie Vedder. Thanks, yeah. I did not bring a slideshow, but I'm going to talk to you about comic books and superheroes and murder mysteries, which are basically the DNA of everything I write. Thanks to House of SpeakEasy for having me. This is always a thrill. It's always interesting to speak into a glaring light and assume that people are looking back at you, but we'll just go from there. Anyway, as was noted, Secret Identity You know, the theme of tonight is the road ahead, but I don't think there is a road ahead without looking back, not to get all like hallmarky about it. Yeah, feels good, right? Yeah, it's nice. So Secret Identity is a novel, a murder mystery set in the comic book industry of 1975. And if you know anything about comics, you know that it was a very different time for comics than today. Today, comics are everywhere. You can turn on the TV and watch a Moon Knight TV show. You can watch the third Ant-Man movie. There's a Arrow TV show. And if you know comics at all, these are like B and C level characters that no one would have ever imagined would be on your television, much less streaming for multiple seasons or featuring Paul Rudd in a starring role. It's kind of amazing. But the comic book industry of 1975 was very different. It was very much a craft that people who were passionate about comics did. They didn't think about stuff that words that we kind of bandy about easily today, like IP or ownership or multimedia exposure. It was a job. It was like making the donuts. You wrote 10 issues of Spider-Man, you wrote a couple issues of the X-Men, you drew the issues, you inked the issues. It was very much a churn. And New York City was the hub of the comic book industry. And so Secret Identity is a story about a queer Cuban-American woman named Carmen Valdez, who, like me, is from Miami and is the product of Cuban immigrants who came over after Castro took over Cuba. And like me as well, she grew up with a passion for comics. To the point, you know, her dad learns English from reading comics, from reading Archie comics and reading Mickey Mouse comics. And so it's part of her DNA as a person. And she wants to kind of achieve the dream. So before comics had become this thing that it is now, where it's not even comics, it's pop culture. Like, you can talk about Avengers movies and not really lose the plot, as opposed to what it was like before. And so Carmen moves up to New York City and gets a job at a third-rate. I promise you I'm not just going to recap my novel. I'm going to get to the point. So she gets a job at this third-rate comic publisher called Triumph Comics. And by third-rate, I mean it wasn't even as big as Marvel or DC was at the time. It was the kind of shop that cranked out mediocre books. And so she gets a job as the secretary to this, I guess the best word is blowhard, is the best way to describe her boss. And she uses the opportunity, like anyone else would in that moment, to pitch him ideas. Like, I've got this idea for a superhero, or I've got this idea, here, can you read my script? And finally he tells her, look, it's just not gonna happen. I've got a line of guys around the door that I have to keep fed, freelancers, buddies I owe a favor to, my bookie, I have to keep them engaged. And just stop asking me these questions. You're getting really annoying, and I have other plans for you. Not a great day for Carmen. She goes back to her room, her apartment, her tiny studio that she has a curtain split between so she can share it with a roommate and split the rent. And starts rummaging through her old comics and kind of reconnecting with what made her excited about comics and writing comics and being in comics. She hears a knock on the door, and it's a colleague, this guy Harvey Stern, who is around her age, maybe a few years younger. He works at Triumph as well. He's an editor. And he says, look, I know you want to write comics. I've got this opportunity. Carlisle, the blowhard previously mentioned, he's given me this assignment to write the first female superhero of Triumph Comics' history. There's a catch, though. I want to write it with you, but there's a catch. The catch being she has to write it anonymously. Yeah, it's a drag. It gets worse. Yeah. So they collaborate. Carmen pours her heart into this story. She's got script snippets, she's got character design, she's got ideas, notebooks that are loaded with stuff. This is like her moment. And she delivers. They write 6 scripts over, and this is really in the weeds talk, but 6 scripts over a weekend is a lot. It's a lot. Just take my word for it. She writes these scripts, they get turned in, and she goes into her boss's office and notices that they're turned in with only Harvey's name, which was what they agreed upon. And then Harvey goes AWOL. He doesn't respond to phone calls. He doesn't show up at work. She goes to his apartment, knocks on the door creaks open. She walks into his apartment further. It smells stale. She starts calling his name. It's me, Carmen. Harvey. She gets to his bedroom, and he's dead. So the issue becomes, there's 6 scripts out there with Harvey's name on them. The comic book has become a hit in the interim, in this time after his death. And one thing, if you know comics, you know that it's not just, Stan Lee isn't still writing the X-Men, obviously, for obvious reasons, but he wasn't writing them up until his death. Walt Disney didn't write Mickey Mouse comics. There's changeover. I can write an issue of Spider-Man, and then eventually somebody else will take over. So Carmen knows the clock is ticking. She knows that at some point they're going to reach script number 7, and somebody else is going to get to write her character. And that character is called the legendary Lynx. Like Carmen is a woman who works as a secretary in a small office and takes on this vigilante role to avenge the death of her sister. So it's got a lot of like her own personal stuff, her baggage, her drama, her dreams, and it's just been wrested away from her. That's Secret Identity now. But the road before, the kind of road that led me to Secret Identity, is the kind of thing that I didn't really realize until after I'd written it. I'm not a thematic writer, meaning I don't think, I'm going to write about overcoming adversity. But it's what I end up writing about. And I usually notice it in the rear view. And so a lot of things, like even Secret Identity, I didn't notice the DNA of the book until now, until after the book's printed and out there and hopefully for sale or whatever, like it exists now. And now I kind of know, I was thinking of that. It's a weird way to be. It's just the creative process is strange. But if you'll get into my DeLorean and hop back maybe 20, let's say 15. I'm in college. I'm not a very good college student. Let's preface it that way. I was not a good college student. I was a great extracurricular college student. And I think you can all understand what that means. I don't drink anymore. But I was really involved in the school newspaper. I was a passionate English lit guy. And I remember really vividly, I'm from Miami, so I went to Florida International University, which you don't have to know. It's just this huge, sprawling public university, so big that it has 2 campuses. Miami's not really built for a huge, kind of college towny university. So it's got 2 campuses. There's a bus that goes from South Campus to North Campus. And I have a vivid memory of reading Michael Chabon's The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, which is a fantastic novel. Everyone should read it. It's about the golden age of comics. And what that means is that's the beginning of comics, like the 1940s, Superman, Batman, all these key characters show up. And it's about these 2 kids, very much like Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who created Superman, these 2 kids who create this character called the Escapist. I'm not going to give you the whole synopsis like I did with Secret Identity, but it's very good. But I remember reading it as a kid, not a kid, I guess a college kid. I remember reading it and just thinking, I want to see the comic books. I want to see the comics that these guys in this book are creating. And I thought, wouldn't that be a great idea if somebody wrote a novel about comic books and then put the comics in there? Okay. And then, as we all do, you file it away and put it in your mental shredder, and maybe it'll come back at some point. And at the time, like I said, not a great college student, but I took creative writing classes. And when I did show up for class, I workshopped a story. And the story was called Sometimes Blue. And it was about an employee at a comic book company who goes through the files of the comic book company and discovers a character that nobody knew existed. I don't know what I got grade-wise because I didn't finish the class. I mean, I know what I didn't do well in the class. I don't know what I got on that assignment. But I had totally blanked on that story until after I'd finished the book. And Secret Identity, which I didn't mention when I gave you the 101, has comic book pages in the novel. So you're reading about Carmen and her plight and how passionate she is about this book, this comic book character, and you get to read the comic book. So you're hopping from prose to comics to prose again. And I think the idea for me was, I really believe in manifesting things. I think there's a way that if you think about something long enough, if you believe in it long enough, and if you inch toward it and kind of nudge yourself and nudge the people around you, you'll eventually get to what you want. It might not be exactly what you want, but it's kind of what you should have gotten. And so that moment of realization, holding up Secret Identity, which so many people have been like, congrats on your debut. It's my 7th book. So yeah, thank you. We made it. I think a lot of people want to kind of tap into whatever they think of as instant success or immediate victory or that sudden twist. And there is no sudden twist. I think everything we do kind of builds on what we did before. And the road ahead is very much a product of the road before. Another moment for me, going even further back, is I was in middle school. And shocker, I was a nerdy comic book fan as a kid. Not on the football team, not like super athletic. And I was a huge Spider-Man fan. And, I think it's interesting. When you're a Cuban-American kid in Miami, you don't feel that sense of other until you leave Miami because the Cuban community is so vibrant, it's so big. But I definitely felt it when consuming media, especially television, books. I didn't have those anchors to identify with characters. So I'm sitting in class, and this other kid says, "Hey, give me $5 and I'll give you this new Spider-Man comic." That was like the whole comic book black market of Miami middle school. And I pick up the comic, and it's called Spider-Man 2099. And how many of you have watched Into the Spider-Verse? Yeah, okay, good. It's popular. But at the time, there was no Spider-Verse back then. There was Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and then there was now this guy, Miguel O'Hara. Now, the last name is a little misleading because that sounds Irish. He's Mexican-Irish. And my point is, when I saw that book and I started reading it, I was like, oh, okay. There's not just Peter Parker, struggling white guy, but still like married to a supermodel and able to swing around town with web shooters and time travel and all that stuff that's going on. There's this guy in the future who's kind of like me, like minus the superpowers and not an adult, but a lot like me. And that sense of identification didn't really kind of come into my view or really kind of set in for me until much later when, after the success of Secret Identity, Marvel reached out and they were like, "We want to do this novel, this Spider-Verse book, and we want you to write this Spider-Verse book with the two Latinx superheroes, Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, and Araña, who's a teenage girl from Brooklyn who has spider powers." And my point is that it's hard to really look forward if you don't know what came before. And so I try to really be mindful of what came before because I know there's the DNA of what makes the future. It's not, let's all like kumbaya about it. But I mean, there really is a theme there that I think about, especially in terms of the day-to-day. And I try to focus on each day as just one opportunity to get a step or two closer to the things I want or the things that I dream of. And just the idea that I had that thought forever ago on a train, like probably hungover, reading a book, and then 20 odd years later, that book is something that exists and has gotten some acclaim I'm extremely thankful for. So anyway, the road ahead is the road back. So I appreciate you guys listening to me, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Alex. That was terrific. Woo! So now the moment in the evening when we see how clever all of you are. The name of the game is Tip of My Tongue. On your table, you'll find little quiz sheets.
Yep, that's right.
And we're going to have a guest speaker come up here, and they're going to read out 3 passages, and you have to guess the name of the work and the author. And the work can be a poem, a novel, a song. Any questions? No phones, no cheating. It's a moment to be together, to remember and these are the books. And the winner of the quiz gets to go home with all of these signed books by all of our speakers tonight. All right? So they're real stakes. No, the white paper, the white program note on your table has the answer on the back. Yes, there we go.
Yep, that's the one.
There we go.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Got it. There we go.
Okay.
And our quiz master tonight, Tori Maldonado. Tori,
Woo! Yes.
Tori is sort of like if the Yankees had Derek Jeter, we have Tori Maldonado. He is a SpeakEasy all-star. He has told a story up here on this stage. He has done events with our bookmobile out and around New York with all ages. He has helped students find their own voices at our college readiness programs. He's basically done everything that we do, he's been part of. He is also as well as doing that, he's a teacher, and he is the author of a number of middle grade books, including the new one, which is just out, called Hands, which is here, yes? So we're thrilled to have Tori once again here on our stage and participating with us tonight. So big round of applause for Tori Maldonado. Oh, and before Tori speaks, you're going to hear a little bit about his work with SpeakEasy. Thank you.
When I was a little boy, I grew up in a book desert. My mom would practice that proverbial saying of taking Moses to the mountain. She would walk me out of our housing projects. Sometimes we would walk 23 blocks. We would go to an author visit, and I call those walks freedom marches. I was getting much more than book access and author access. I was getting to be freed through the imagination that books introduce. This program is different than a lot of programs I've interacted with because it takes that idea of bringing Moses to the mountain and it reverses it. It brings the mountain to Moses. It's giving young people access to literature, access to expression, and access to authors. We want to expose young people to people who represent possibility. Kids need to know how much you care before they care about how much you know. It's more important to connect heart to heart first, and then you could move on to connecting head to head. If an educator's language is inaccessible, then the speech isn't easy. It's not SpeakEasy. And we want books, we want authors to speak in accessible language. Every event that I've been at, the young people are encouraged to speak easy. They're speaking easy on the stage of Joe's Pub, here at the Union Settlement. They find it easy to speak, and they're speaking about complex, universal, timeless themes, big ideas. Every time I'm here, the young people have a desire to be seen. Here they feel heard, so there's some strength in their voices. When I look at the young people in here, it feels like family. It's amazing to watch the young people actively listen to each other and then actively respond to each other. Part of the magic of my storytelling is that it's giving young people the support and the permission to unleash the magic in them.
So it's true what they say about New York City, right? Bright lights, big city. Lights are blinding. So, we're going to start with reading some quotes, and I'm going to quiz you first. If we said, "Welcome to New York, concrete jungle where dreams are made of," who said that? Alicia Keys, right? We have a few people yell Alicia Keys. Awesome. And we're going to read another quote. And this quote is behind me. No, it's going to be behind me in a moment. It's weird because we always have this voice inside our heads, right? So while I was behind the curtain, I heard that voice, and I was like, wait, the voice in my head just got louder. So the voice up there. So I'm going to read a quote to you. Are you ready? All right, where is this quote from? "Captain, this is madness. High time you thought of your own home at last, if it really is your fate, to make it back alive and reach your well-built house and native land. Their urging brought my stubborn spirit round. So all that day, till the sun went down, we sat and feasted on sides of meat and heady wine. Then, when the sun had set and night came on, the men lay down to sleep in the shadowed halls. But I went up to that luxurious bed of Circe's, hugged her by the knees, and the goddess heard my winging supplication. Circe, now make a promise. You gave me once, it's time to help me home. My heart longs to be home. My comrades' hearts as well." So that's the end of quote 1. I didn't realize tonight would be so educational. I'm a teacher, and I've been teaching for 25 years, but I'm talking about this is phonics on phonics. I'm reading while you got the words up there. Are you ready for the next quote? Quote 2. And I could sing this, but I think that's not my, someone said, please. That's not my superpower. I wish I could flex that superpower and sing, but I'll probably sing a little bit. I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long time coming. I think some of y'all know how to end this, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. If there was one song I could sing, that would be the song right there. Woo! I was joking. My wife is in the audience right now. I was saying that she should come up and sing because she has a much better voice than me. Right? Do it, do it, do it. No, she's probably turning redder than me right now. Here's quote number 3. I'll think of it all tomorrow at Tara. I can stand it then. Tomorrow, I'll think of some way to get him back. After all, tomorrow is another day. All right? So those are the 3 quotes. Good luck.
Those around you, they don't know how you feel and the ways in which you'd like to grow. There are tulips, there are sunflowers, there are daisies. You should know I wish to be just like you. Oh, your freedom had me feeling kind of blue, slightly jealous. You're contagious. It's outrageous that I found you. Like a flower starts falling. Skies are gray. I felt so great. Dreaming of you.
everybody. Just to remind you, I'm Amanda Foreman, this is House of Speakeasy, and all of you tonight are actually part of history. Yes. And every one of you will remember the 7th of March because you were part of the 10th anniversary. So congratulations. So our third speaker tonight she writes many things, and she is both a historian and a poet, which is very unusual, but there are a few historians who can get beyond the literal matter of their subject. I speak as a historian myself, so to be a poet as well, I feel, is to be kind of part of the metaphysical aspects of life and the past. She got her PhD from Columbia, and she teaches both writing, poetry, and history. So she really is like the triple threat of academia. She's won many awards, and among her books are Doubt, my favorite, History of Doubt, The Happiness Myth, and poetry books Who Said, The Next Ancient World, and Funny. And tonight, rather excitingly, is the pub date of her new book, The Wonder Paradox. I know! Woo, woo, woo! So this is what the poet Billy Collins said of her book. The Wonder Paradox leads its readers into the open space between the extremes of atheism and religious belief. Here, spiritual insights that lie hidden in daily experience are released through secular rituals and the practice of poetry. So true. Ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Michael Hecht.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm a poet and a historian and an accidental atheist priest. I didn't mean it, but it happened. So what happened is 20 years ago, I wrote a book called Doubt, a History. And since then, I've been invited to give talks to atheist groups and irreligious houses of worship and universities all over the country and all over the world, really. And I was shocked at how personal some of the questions were, given that, especially in the beginning, my talks were very much about history and a little bit of philosophy. Well, it started right away at one of my the very first large hall Doubt talk at Caltech. I'm signing books afterwards, and up comes this terrifically pregnant couple, and they ask if they can ask a question. I figure it's going to be something about Darwin or Einstein. No, can they have a bris? Who am I? But I realize that as a historian, I do have an answer for them, okay? They're atheists. They don't believe in God. Their whole families are believing Jews. They had been believing Jews, and they genuinely do not want to insult their beautiful ex-religion, nor do they want to be blasphemous to rationalism, to what they really believe. So they're asking me what I think, because they've sussed from my talk that I'm one of the rare atheists that isn't exactly against religion, and certainly isn't against ritual. In a sense, once you get past a certain point, once you get past the political debate, you can look around and say, hey, religion was a human construction. We made it. And if we drop it because we don't believe in the supernatural part, we may be dropping other parts that are helpful to human beings, right? That help us thrive: community, ritual, meditation. So they're asking me if they can have a bris. I say, mazel tov, go ahead. I can tell they want to. I don't see any problem with it. But as they're leaving, I say, oh, but add a poem. I think about the rituals I've been to where everybody involved doesn't believe in God, and the ritual, the only thing they're saying that's strengthening everybody is something about God, going to help them raise the child or deal with the death or deal with, or keep the marriage going. So when I'm at a ritual where someone breaks out a poem, I don't mind if they do the God thing too. I don't happen to. I think it's nice for everybody to have a good time, whatever. But at least have something there that if you don't believe in God, there's something rich and uplifting there for you. So I say, add a poem, and they turn around and I say, Whitman? And again, they're sort of heading out and I say, wait, there's a part in Leaves of Grass where he puts this question separate, and then he says this description of himself and life, which are just utter despair. He just feels terrible. He's rotten, the world's rotten. Why bother? Why do it? What is it for? And then Whitman has answer, and then just these 2 lines. That you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. They look at me and I look at them and the people around us, and there's a feeling, that you may contribute a verse. It kept happening. Well, I'll say my husband, John, was there, and he turned to me after they left and said the only thing missing was the word Rebbe. I was like, yeah, what just happened there? People kept asking me questions about life rituals and about holidays, how to manage families that had different beliefs, and also how to manage their own conflicting beliefs and feelings. And then I would start with history and end up giving them a poem because they were in pain. Look, history cured me. History helped me, learning how many different religions there are and how many of them don't have an afterlife, and you just tilt your attention elsewhere. The abyss becomes really just a shadow from having stared at heaven too long. There's nothing there. Just turn away. But that doesn't help people fast, the history stuff. What helps people fast is the poetry. And I always, because I'm a poet, because I read poetry, because poetry helps me, I was giving that away. So there were also questions, well, more comments on existential issues. They weren't asking, they were telling me. So there was one where an older gentleman raises his hand after the talk and says, that I'm completely mistaken. You cannot have meaning without God. You cannot have the idea of community without God. That without God, we are islands. We are totally alone. And he's citing this centuries-old idea of that without God we're islands. It's an old notion, and this separation that entails. And luckily, I just happened to think of this poem by Muriel Rukeyser, and we all looked it up. And the first stanza goes, and I read it aloud, islands, oh, for God's sake, they're connected underneath. Well, the man laughs, and because of his openness, because in that moment he was able to hear that the rest of the audience was loving on him, not laughing at him, because there was this awe in it as well, the sigh of awe and wonder, as well as he laughed, and it let us all laugh, and there was a feeling, again, this feeling in the room, because we are connected, and when we try to connect, it shows, it happens. The magic doesn't always work, but it can. For me, the magic also sort of worked through words. I grew up on Long Island in a Jewish household. My mother believed, my father was a scientist atheist, right? But my mom was in charge of us. So I believed until I had a sort of moment at age 12, kind of moment that young people have where you suddenly see a certain slant of light and the beauty shocks you. And I just suddenly realized I could have been born anywhere else in the world and I would have believed what they believed there. And it was terribly troubling, but also very freeing. But I was upset afterwards, and I was a little lost. I had thought that life was a riddle that you could solve, and that now there wouldn't be a solution. And I was already working hard at that age, and it seemed kind of rough. And one day I'm standing in the middle school library in front of the little section of poetry, and I take out this book literally called Poetry for Depressed Teenagers. Okay, I've tried to find it, and it can't have been titled that, but it was something very close, okay? And I take it out, and I'm teen sure nothing the adult world is gonna help me. And I'm looking through, and nothing does help me. And out wafts a little piece of paper, having been cut out of another source by vigorous use of a blue ballpoint pen. And it wafts out, and I go pick it up, and it's this quote by Rainer Maria Rilke. And I thought she was pretty cool until I found out they just give German boys Maria as a middle name. And the quote says, "Be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions. Do not seek now for the answers, because the answers could not be given you, because you have not lived them. And the point is to live everything. So live the questions now, and perhaps you will, some distant day, without even noticing it, live into the answers." I was solved. It wasn't like it took a while. Boom. I just said, oh, I can live the questions. I can do. I get this. And I held that piece of, I kept that piece of paper for decades. So here I am, an adult, I'm a poet, I'm a historian, I was formed by poetry, I'm giving prescriptions of poetry to people. And of course, I start thinking deeply about the way that ritual and poetry works together in religion, but also out of religion, from the Pledge of Allegiance to poetry at an inauguration. We know that it's a way of creating a very, well, I rehabilitate the word sacred in my new book, The Wonder Paradox. It's a sacred moment. The word sacred predates the religious use, started out as treaty. Because, something very holy between two people. Yeah, you killed mine, I killed yours, we won't do it anymore. And if you can make that treaty once, you can carry its name to a new place and hallow new ground. The sacred really matters. And it isn't religious, it's what we hold sacred. And so I'm thinking about all this, and I'm realizing that science isn't enough for me. I don't believe the religion, supernatural part. Science isn't enough because of the wonder paradox. Well, because of all the paradoxes. We mostly live in the human experience, and the human experience is full of paradox. We are ambitious mortals. Go do with something with that, right? We're already ambitious and mortal, right? We also conscious. A paradox is when two things are true and you put them next to each other and they cannot both be true. They cancel each other out, and yet they don't. Think about meat for a second, a hamburger, or you have some right here, just give it a pinch. Do you see any chance that it can think? Meat can't think. Yeah, but the meat thinks. The meat has done all the thinking. It's written all the songs, these globs of gray goo that don't even last very long. They sort of have to hand it off to each other. That has created all the music and all the books and the whole astounding modern world. That's the consciousness paradox. Consciousness is weirder than virgin birth. I mean, come on. I can imagine virgin birth, right? A couple of cells start to divide on their own, fine. But the meat thinks? That I cannot imagine. I could spend 1,000 years in a lab trying to make meat think, and I'm not going to do it, but my dumb body did it twice. They're back there. So I'm thinking about the consciousness paradox, but also the wonder paradox. The fact that we material beings evolved into creatures that have awe and wonder, that look up at the night sky and see a white stripe and slowly come to realize that it's stars, and eventually to understand that we're in a galaxy. And that's the side of it. The whole idea that we can fit ourselves into rationality just doesn't quite work, and yet I want nothing really from religion except, well, all its good practices. So I really came to writing this book, The Wonder Paradox. It was kind of a coming together of all these different things, but it was that people were asking me questions all the time. So there are 20 chapters, and they are 20 of the questions or problems that have been brought to me. One of the most straightforward is the problem of shame. A lot of us feel shame a lot of the time, and we don't know what to do with it. The modern world has nothing for it, really, except confessing. I mean, so in the 20 chapters, the chapter on shame, as in all the chapters, I sort of tell a story, then I tell how different religions around the world have solved that. And different religions around the world all have things for shame. They're mostly about fasting or giving something up or water. Swimming in the Ganges. The Ganges will clean you from sin, but also to go to a Shinto temple, you step over those rivulets because they clean you. Because fasting and water are the two big ways that we do this. You can't get your hands clean from thinking about washing them, and maybe you can't get your heart clean either. You maybe have to do something, or at least if nothing else is working, get up and do something. And here's what the religions, these ancient human practices, have offered. So, in the shame chapter, I close with the poem of, each chapter has a poem that I look at, and that one I look at Shakespeare's When in Disgrace with Fortune in Men's Eyes, I alone beweep my outcast state. He went at myself almost despising. Happily, accidentally, I think on thee, and then my soul like a lark unto the break of day arising sings hymns at heaven's gate, for thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings that I would scorn to change my state with kings. That is an incredible statement by a guy who is the absolute top of accomplishment of all time. The man hates himself. It really ought to show us that if he hates himself, we must be all right. This must be a feature of the program, and we just have to cope with it, right? So, I think back, that baby that was in utero at the beginning of this story is 20 years old now, and I wonder what we're giving the next generation to believe in. You know, humanism just as such sounding like that, it's not enough. I think about the wonder that we're living in, the amazing infinitesimal and the intensely gigantic, and all the wonders of being and recreating and babies and death and the whole magical part, and that we somehow hold each other together, and that for God's sake, they are connected underneath, and that we can live the questions, and that the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. Thanks.
Yes, one more time for Jennifer Michael Hecht. Woo woo! Okay, so our final speaker of the evening is John McWhorter. For those of you who don't know who John McWhorter is, he is, well, first of all, he's one of those triple threats. He teaches linguistics and Western civilization and music history at Columbia University. He also has a column at the New York Times. He's also been a contributing editor at The Atlantic. He's also written for the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Time, you name it, frankly. Oh, and the New Republic. And he has written numerous books. His latest two bestsellers were Woke Racism and 9 Nasty Words. And there was one particular reviewer who I think really captured one of the kind of sparkling essences of John's works. The reviewer said that, and this was about 9 Nasty Words, said that it has such a celebration of language that it teaches us how to see English in high definition and love it as it really is, right now, and in its myriad incarnations to come. Like, yes, that is a great love of English, that sentence. So, without further ado, John McWhorter.
Hey there, folks. I do not have a PowerPoint, and I'm just sorry, but I'm just going to talk. And it's not going to be for too long. But what I want to share with you is some thoughts on, in terms of the road ahead, what language will be like in, let's say, 21, 23. What is language going to be like in the world? Not just English, but language in the world. And I say world because there are 7,000 languages in the world. It's really 6,000, but some people say 7,000, and that sounds better, so I'll just say 7,000 languages in the world. And the truth is that in about 100 years, we would be lucky to have 700. It's probably going to be more like 500. Languages are disappearing in the same way as flora and fauna are disappearing. And so one thing that will be the case in 100 years is that there'll be many fewer languages than there are now around the world. And the reason for that is that globalization, and take it or leave it, probably both, but for better or for worse, globalization is incompatible with there being the diversity of languages that there is now. There's no way that with the world as it's been lately, especially over about the past 50 years, there could exist 7,000 vastly different ways of communicating. And that's because in a globalizing world, a certain few languages are inevitably perceived as cooler, better, as avenues to more income. And in a world like that, where the smaller, more obscure languages are spoken, people are taken away from it to live in, for example, cities where the bigger languages are spoken. And so there are monster languages, such as the one that I'm speaking, that are quickly eating up most of the languages of the world. And so, for example, English, as mundane as this language is in the grand scheme of things, really, about 10 minutes from now, 1 in 3 people in the world are going to speak English, of all things, from some windy island 1,500 years ago. 1 in 3 people are going to speak the language that happened to develop there. And it'll be hard to nudge it out of place, and there is a fantasy that I have, because it's so cool, which is that Mandarin Chinese, which currently is spoken by more people than English, would be the world's universal language and not boring, oppressive English. But it's not. It's just not. It's not going to happen. And that's because Mandarin is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But it's harder than English, and people don't like languages that are hard. And so if you've got a language where you have to master not only the sounds, but the tones, and so if you say ma, that's mother. Ma is horse. Ma is to scold. Ma means hemp for some reason. If you just say ma, then that's a question mark. Sorry. Even speakers of other languages with tone have trouble learning a language with tone. And then the Chinese writing system is a glorious thing, but sorry, no. And so Mandarin is not going to be the universal language. It's going to be English, because English got there first, just like the QWERTY keyboard. That's just the way things go. It's hard to type, and we're stuck with it, and you wouldn't want it any other way. And so we're stuck with it. There are the big 20 languages. It's not going to be just English. There will be about 500 languages. Frankly, I think that's athletic. Some hundreds of languages. People will be bilingual, but English will be the dominant one. But if not English, it'll be others. There's a top 20. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. The top 20. English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, German, Russian, Arabic, Javanese, Japanese, those are different languages, Korean, Mandarin, Cantonese, and Shanghainese of Chinese, Vietnamese, believe it or not. Then in India, it's Hindi, Urdu, Marathi, and Bengali, and then Tamil and Telugu. That's 20. Those are the top 20 languages that are going to take over. I can't believe I did that without reading. Those are the top 20. Indonesian is like right below. Those are the ones that are eating up all the others, and that's the way, unfortunately, it's going to be. Something else about language in the future. Overall, languages are going to get easier. Not always. Russian's hard, and it's going to stay that way. But languages overall are going to get easier. And you can see it happening month by month, year by year. And so, for example, the small languages, the ones that are obscure, the ones that are in danger of dying because now only elderly people are speaking them, you can try to revitalize them, and there are wonderful efforts to do that all over the world. But when you do it, the way it gets revitalized is not the way it used to be. And that's because most languages in the world are much, 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 much harder than English. We English speakers think all languages are like the boy bounced a ball down the street. That's a weirdly streamlined way for a language to be. And so if a language is revitalized, it's going to be simplified because most human languages are too damned hard. And what I mean by that, it's, of course, there's no value judgment. But so, for example, Navajo, the Native American language spoken in the southwestern United States, you know, Navajo has all irregular verbs. All. There's no pattern. And so 5,000 verbs you just have to know. Toddlers take it in, and by the time they realize how crazy this is, they've already done it, and they're busy being teenagers. That's the way it works. Another example, think about in English, woman, women. Oop, you know, that's the way it is. Goose, geese. Child, children. There are, by my count, 13 of those, and otherwise it's music stand, music stands, right? I'm taking, this is random. Remember when Darfur was in the news a lot? If you were a linguist, you thought, what do they speak there? They speak a language called Fur. In Fur, all the nouns have irregular plurals. Every noun. What is the irregular plural for finger? That they don't say fingers, it's going to be something like funger. What is the plural of dog? And literally, I'm not going to give you the actual word, but the plural of dog is like Google. It's something completely, completely different. And you just have to know. And so if there's a revitalization, it's going to get easier. It's going to be dogs. You're going to fix it. And so there are going to be all of these revitalized languages, and you know, thank God they're going to be spoken, but they're not going to be like they used to be. So there's that. And then there's also something that's happening all over the world. This is something that only linguists and anthropologists study, which is that when immigrants move into a city, and then they have kids, the kids often learn the language of the new country, like you're Turkish and you move to Germany, they speak perfect German. Their parents never do, because over a certain age, you're not going to learn a language perfectly. Something that kids often do in their teens is they come up with a way of speaking casually that's somewhere in between the standard and the way their parents spoke, to salute what their parents speak. And so they end up speaking, say, a simplified German. Not super simplified, but getting rid of a lot of the harder things, because that is a way of being somebody who both is in the new society and has these parents. The first time that's recorded to have happened is in Hawaii. There's something called Hawaiian Pidgin. It's not a pidgin, it's a whole language. But where that happened was kids who were Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Puerto Rican. There were 2 West Indians and a few Portuguese kids. All of them are in school. Literally it was 2. You can document these things. They're all in school, they're learning standard English, but their parents all speak broken English. They learned among themselves to speak this Creole English that kind of splits the difference, although they can speak standard if they want to. That's now happening in what seems like every European capital. It's happening in a lot of African capitals as well. So written language will stay the same, but spoken language will be easier. It'll be more streamlined, because the people who are doing that now at 22 are going to keep doing it when they're 52. So for example, in this country, we think of like this, like as kids. But do you notice that people have been talking that way since the 80s? There are people now who use like that much whose hair is graying. These things settle in. Same thing with these teen ways of speaking. So, easier. And easier in another way too. Not easier structurally, but the third and final thing is that language around the world is going to be less formal. This is something that probably begins in the United States in the late 60s. And now the general informality is almost a rule. And so in this country, for example, it used to be that if I stood up here and gave this speech, I would have a piece of paper, I'd be reading from it, I'd be using a lot of $64,000 words, and I would have cleared my throat before I said anything. Instead, I'm standing here in a sport coat I don't usually wear and just kind of talking out of my head. That would have been unheard of as late as 1960 in this particular setting. And so it means that, of course, in the old days, there was colloquial language, but you just don't know about it. And so, for example, there's a Looney Tune, ancient one, like way back, where at one point, the first Looney Tunes character was not good like Bugs Bunny. It was this Mickey Mouse knockoff named Bosco. Bosco sucked. He was just awful. But in one cartoon, he's really, really angry, and he looks at this character, and he says, "You dirty pup!" And you're thinking, dirty pup? That was hot pepper back then. To call somebody a dirty pup, like your great-great-grandparents, that was like calling somebody a dirty something else. The reason that it's so hard to know that, unless you watch really bad old cartoons or really trivial old novels, is because people didn't put that sort of thing in print. That's changed. And so most of us here are familiar with seeing the Con Ed trucks go by, where, say, the slogan is, "On it, on it." Like, you know, something's broken, we're on it. That's great. But if you think about it, that would not have been a slogan in, say, 1990. I don't think even in 95. It's too colloquial. Or, if I may, this is something we show our children. There's a book, a children's book called Go the Fuck to Sleep. We are in a brand new era, and, you know, it's a wonderful thing. That is happening all around the world, that line between the formal and the informal is not what it used to be. So, you know, these are supposed to be 10-minute talks, and I've gone over, and that's just not done. So I'm going to summarize by saying that we are moving on to a future of language where there aren't going to be as many of them. They are going to tend to be easier, and the line between the formal and the informal is going to be much hazier. And you know, formality is overrated, and all languages have always been too hard. I'm not dreading going into this future on the, watch what I'm going to do, road ahead. However, as a linguist, there is a part of me that looks at the road before, and people like me are diligently concerned with documenting the way language was in the past, because there were good things about that too. But the road ahead is going to be very different from where we are now. Thank you.
Okay, come on, one more time for John McWhorter. Woo, woo!
And a big round of applause for all of our speakers tonight. What a great lineup.
Okay, so now, can everybody please look at their tables? Don't look at Lucas and myself. Look at your tables. And on the tables, you can see the orange postcards. Congratulations, that is your golden ticket to a... No, sorry, it isn't. It is not that. But it is a reminder that we are having our 10th anniversary fundraising gala on the 13th of April. Play it forward. And I invite all of you to come. It will be an evening of games, of laughter, of tears, excitement, and donations, so that SpeakEasy can continue its terrific programs that you've seen that we do. And we do it with your support. So please come and donate. Now, without further ado, the quiz. Okay, Lucas.
We have 2 winners tonight. But only one can go home with the books. So we have to choose. But before we get there, we're going to tell you the answers. The first passage was The Odyssey by Homer.
Yes.
The second passage, song. Tori gave it away a little bit. A Change Is Gonna Come by the one and only Sam Cooke. And finally, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell.
Yeah, that caught people out. That did, okay.
So, 2 people got it all right.
Yeah,
And
just two.
Amanda's going to pick.
Okay. Yeah, actually, congratulations, everyone, for not cheating. Because if you had cheated, we'd have more winners. So, okay. Okay. Wait, one more? Oh, well. Oh, okay. A late comer. Uh-oh. Okay, all right.
A twist, a twist.
Okay, all right. Drum roll, please. Thank you. Very good. Okay. Wow, okay. And the winner is Jonathan Cott. Congratulations. Woo! Okay, well done. And then they can buy them.
That's our show tonight. As you exit, books by all of the authors tonight will be on sale. You can get your books signed. Please support their work. Thank you all for coming. We'll be back here on this stage on May 9th, but we hope in the meantime to see all of you on April 13th for our gala. Thank you all for coming tonight, and a big round of applause for our speakers.